Have you ever suddenly realized you're mindlessly picking up your phone, scrolling endlessly? Constant flashing notifications, engaging short videos, instant entertainment. These things are slowly turning us into dopamine addicts. The protagonist of today's story was trapped in that cycle, always stressed, distracted, and unable to escape the seemingly harmless grip of his phone. Until one day, he decided to make a change, embarking on a unique, dopamine detox journey, a journey to reclaim freedom. Starting with the smallest habits. I believe many of us have experienced that very feeling. I certainly have, and the protagonist of today's story was no exception. Every morning, the first thing he did upon waking wasn't drinking water, brushing his teeth, or stretching to greet the day. It was reaching immediately for the phone lying beside his pillow. He checked notifications, read news updates, scrolled through Facebook or TikTok for a few minutes before he was fully awake. Throughout the day, every single spare moment, no matter how brief, he instinctively reached for his phone, waiting for friends, standing in line at the supermarket checkout, even sitting in the bathroom. He constantly found himself mindlessly scrolling. Initially, he saw this as harmless behavior. After all, isn't everyone doing it? But gradually, things became far more serious than he ever imagined. His work started to suffer. Important tasks were repeatedly delayed. He often felt anxious and stressed without fully understanding why. Sleep no longer came easily because each night, he would spend hours staring at his screen before finally drifting off. Everything came to a head one afternoon while he was sitting in a cafe. Determined to focus on an important task for an hour, he promised himself he wouldn't touch his phone. Yet just a few minutes later, his fingers automatically unlocked the screen, opened the usual apps, and he fell back into the digital rabbit hole. When he finally looked up again, nearly an hour had slipped away unnoticed. A heavy sense of disappointment overwhelmed him. He realized he'd lost control. What he once considered an innocent habit had now evolved into a full-fledged addiction, a dopamine addiction. He was hooked on the fleeting pleasure provided by notifications, short videos, comments, and likes. Ironically, the convenience of his phone, which once brought entertainment and relaxation, was now quietly destroying his ability to concentrate and fully engage with real life. He understood clearly that something needed to change. But how could he free himself from something he'd grown so dependent on for such a long time? He didn't yet know the answer. But for the first time in years, he genuinely wanted to reclaim control of his own life. Realizing that he was trapped in a vicious cycle of phone addiction was only the first step. But awareness alone was not enough. To truly regain control of his life, he needed concrete action. That's when he decided to embark on a special, dopamine detox, a serious but challenging plan. The first step he took was setting strict limitations on himself. He downloaded an app designed to track and manage his daily screen time. Initially, his goal was straightforward: reduce his screen time to half of what it normally was. Yet, even this modest goal proved challenging. He soon realized he was battling intense internal resistance every time his phone alerted him that he'd reached his usage limit. He felt restless and uneasy. But it was exactly this discomfort that made him deeply realize how severe his addiction truly was. Next, he disabled all notifications from social media, email, and entertainment apps. At first, it felt strange and uncomfortable, leading him to repeatedly check for notifications anyway. Gradually, however, he learned how to live without the constant pings and buzzes, without the urgency of needing to respond immediately. The silence initially felt unusual. Yet it brought him profound relief and a newfound sense of freedom. But the most crucial aspect of his strategy was replacing the habit of reaching for his phone with healthier activities. He began placing books strategically around his living space, one beside his bed, another at his desk, and even a small book tucked into his pocket whenever he left home. Every time he found himself instinctively reaching for his phone, he deliberately redirected himself to pick up a book and read a few pages. Or stood up and engaged in brief physical activity, like walking around for a few minutes or simply sitting quietly to take deep, calming breaths. Gradually, these replacement behaviors evolved into positive new habits, breaking the cycle of dopamine addiction driven by his phone. These small daily steps were not always easy, and some days proved especially tough. But with each passing day, he felt he regained a little more freedom, a little more of the control over his life that he had unknowingly surrendered. Despite successfully implementing strict measures like limiting screen time and disabling notifications, he soon realized that simply avoiding old habits wasn't enough to truly break free from his phone's dopamine grip. Every time we attempt to abandon a negative habit, our brains inevitably seek ways to revert to old patterns, unless we provide it with a compelling, positive habit strong enough to completely replace the old one. He understood clearly that eliminating a bad habit would be impossible without replacing it with something more meaningful and beneficial. Thus, he actively started seeking and developing new positive habits, habits powerful enough to fill the void his phone addiction had left behind. The first new habit he chose was reading consistently every day. Previously, reading had always been challenging for him, as his mind wandered frequently, losing focus after just a few minutes. But now, whenever he felt the craving to grab his phone, he gently reminded himself, just read for 5 minutes. Something remarkable happened. Within just a few weeks, a daily reading habit began forming naturally. He found himself becoming genuinely absorbed in the pages, forgetting the initial restlessness, and gradually extending his reading time from 5 minutes to 15, then 20, and eventually an entire hour. He also began finding joy in simple physical activities. Each time his mind started losing control and craving his phone, he immediately stood up and went outside for a short walk. Initially, these walks lasted just a few minutes around his neighborhood, but soon they grew longer each day. This gentle physical movement not only calmed his restless urges but also provided immediate clarity and alertness. He soon discovered that this healthy, natural form of dopamine, generated by physical activity, made him feel genuinely positive without the need for his phone's artificial stimulation. Additionally, he learned the value of dedicating quiet time each day to meditation. Every evening, instead of lying in bed mindlessly scrolling, he began focusing on his breathing, tuning into the subtle sounds around him, and becoming vividly aware of his own body. At first, his mind wandered constantly, but gradually, he learned to relax fully and embrace the quietness. These meditation moments taught him a profound lesson. Life doesn't always need constant stimulation from social media and digital distractions. Peacefulness and clarity of mind, he discovered, often turned out to be the most precious reward of all. By intentionally constructing and replacing his old habits with healthier alternatives, he didn't just break free from his dopamine addiction, he also discovered deeper, more meaningful joys far surpassing the fleeting entertainment his phone once provided. Today, he can proudly say that he created a more balanced, healthier, and freer life, a life over which he now has complete control. In the early days of changing his habits, despite significant positive progress, things weren't always easy or comfortable for him. In fact, during those initial periods, he faced numerous difficulties, particularly evident in the emotional discomfort he experienced. The main reason stemmed from having to confront boredom, a state he'd previously avoided by constantly reaching for his phone. We are all accustomed to running away from boredom. Whenever we feel bored or empty, our instinctive reaction is to immediately seek out something to fill that void: social media, games, or entertaining videos. He was no exception. In the past, he never truly allowed himself to experience the feeling of doing absolutely nothing. However, now, during this process of change, he was forced to confront boredom head-on. The first few days were genuinely tough. Each time he resisted his habit of picking up the phone, he felt restless and anxious. At times, he even described the feeling as if something essential was missing from his life. In those moments, his craving to reach out and touch his phone felt like a genuine addiction, requiring significant determination to endure every passing minute. Yet, it was precisely through this challenging process that he learned a crucial lesson: patience and the ability to endure moments of emptiness. Instead of quickly seeking distractions to eliminate boredom, he began observing it calmly. He started asking himself a new question: what would happen if I just allowed boredom to occur naturally? Is it really as frightening as I imagine? Surprisingly, the more he accepted and observed his boredom rather than fighting against it, the less discomfort he felt. He discovered that boredom itself wasn't as dangerous or unbearable as he once believed. It wasn't something that needed to be avoided at all costs. Instead, by allowing himself to experience it fully, He gradually found a profound sense of inner peace. He soon realized that within those seemingly meaningless moments of boredom, his mind began to engage more creatively. Fresh ideas and new insights unexpectedly emerged once his brain was no longer overwhelmed by constant external stimuli. Gradually, he learned to appreciate these empty moments, recognizing them as an essential part of building a balanced and free life. Accepting and overcoming initial boredom was far from easy, but it became a key factor in completely breaking his dependence on the dopamine hits provided by his phone. This was the real turning point, empowering him to reclaim control over his mind and helping him discover a newfound tranquility within himself. Overcoming the initial boredom not only freed him from his phone addiction but also led to significant positive changes in his daily life. As he adapted to quiet moments, his brain gradually regained its ability to focus and maintain clarity. Tasks that previously seemed impossible to complete without immediate motivation became easier, as he was no longer constantly interrupted by notifications and dopamine-driven distractions. Each morning upon waking, instead of immediately reaching for his phone, he now spent a few moments taking deep breaths and calmly organizing his thoughts. This simple habit allowed him to start each day with a clear and stable mind. The restless anxiety he previously experienced each morning had vanished. The focus he had long lost finally returned, significantly boosting his productivity. Tasks once consistently postponed were now efficiently completed, thanks to his renewed and sustained concentration. Furthermore, he noticed his relationships with those around him had grown deeper and more meaningful. When interacting with friends or family, he was now fully present, no longer glancing repeatedly at his phone screen mid-conversation. His genuine attentiveness made those around him feel more valued and respected. This seemingly small change brought about a much stronger emotional connection. He came to understand that sincere presence was indeed the foundation for meaningful, lasting relationships. Perhaps most significantly, once he became accustomed to spending considerably less time on his phone, he found himself with an abundance of free time he had previously believed didn't exist. Moments he once considered too short or insignificant to be productive suddenly felt spacious, providing him opportunities to explore new activities. He began exercising more consistently, learned new skills, or simply spent peaceful, quiet moments with himself. These healthy new habits enriched and diversified his daily life in ways he hadn't previously imagined. Above all, the most profound insight he gained from his dopamine detox journey was realizing that true happiness and satisfaction don't arise from short-lived pleasures or immediate stimulations, but rather from stability, balance, and self-control. The deep joy he now experienced daily was a direct result of his persistence, discipline, and ability to endure initial discomforts. Reflecting back on the entire challenging journey, he recognized that every small step he'd taken had been entirely worth it. He had truly reclaimed the freedom, clarity, and genuine joy his phone had once quietly stolen away. His story proves clearly that we can transform our lives through small daily steps. Don't let temporary comforts rob you of self-control. Persist through initial difficulties. Create meaningful and positive habits, because true freedom and happiness arrive only when you master your own mind and actions.